So, good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. We're back with a live broadcast. It's been some time since we've done this here at Worlds from the East. And today I'm very delighted to have a chat with Zahir Khan. He's going to join us soon. He specializes in self-help, and he does sessions for individuals, for companies, and he's gonna join us soon. We're gonna have a chat with him. We're gonna talk about what he does, the spiritual bases of what he does, and also about languages, about Eastern culture. Zahir is British Asian. I think that's what you call them, right? Or Asian, Brit of Asian origin. And I think he's going to have a lot of interesting things to say, a lot of interesting things to share with us. So I'm waiting for him currently to join us. So we have Zaman Enes online with us. And Noor. Yes, Zahir is with us currently. Let's let him in right now. Shamil Khan. Hello, Shamil. Hello, good evening.
Hello, how are you? Are you good?
How about you, Zahir?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. My first
You've
time
been-
Instagram live, so there we go.
Huh?
I can hardly hear you. I don't know why, but your audio is not brilliant.
Cool. Okay, so I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, but your audio is kind of jumpy.
Okay, great. So I just want you to hang around for just a few minutes,
Okay,
a few seconds. Okay?
no worries.
So apparently I need my headphones. Is it better now?
There you go. Little bit, yeah. I'm sure
Oh, really?
we'll sort
Okay,
this out. So, yeah.
great. Okay, so I mean, if you can hear me, if you can understand me, I think, can you understand me right now?
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's start. So I'm happy to have Zahir. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Zahir or Zahir?
It's Zahir. Zahir.
Zahir. Okay, Zahir.
Yeah.
Because when I looked you up on Google, there was a cricketer called Zahir Khan.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to say he's my cousin, but he's not. So yeah,
Oh, okay.
he's the more
He
famous one
could
out
be
of
a
the two.
cousin. He could be a cousin
He
though.
could be the
Yeah.
way things have been. Yeah,
So I'm very delighted to have you with me tonight, and we're just gonna chat about a few stuff that our listeners might find interesting. So, I mean, I've seen your Instagram. It's very interesting. You have a lot of quotes. You have a lot of poetry from your book. I think you have a book on Amazon, right?
yeah. I've got two books. One's called Falling into
Mm-hmm.
the Mystery, and the other one's called Reflections, which is a book on poetry, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit of a nod to my past.
Mm-hmm.
The eastern part of my, like obviously heritage, because I
Mm-hmm.
was born in the UK, but my parents originally were from Kashmir and Pakistan
Mm-hmm.
originally. So I grew up in a household which was obviously immersed in the Islamic culture and obviously also
Mm-hmm.
immersed in Sufism as well,
Mm-hmm.
but not in a kind of formal way. So in the Indian subcontinent, we listen to Qawwali. We have this strong, rich Sunni heritage,
Mm-hmm.
and basically I've kind of absorbed all that by osmosis, I suppose. And then God, due to obviously a few things happening in my life, what I decided to do was start looking for the meaning of life, so to speak. In the best way to say is like just because it made sense because I was life was failing and I really wanted to obviously find
Okay.
out what it all meant.
And you found inspiration in your culture and heritage.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is we have an interesting situation happening in the UK whereby I'm a first generation British Asian. I would just
Mm-hmm.
say Asian as a matter of fact. So, you know, my parents were originally from the Indian subcontinent. What we're seeing now is that, like, we've created our own identity as each successive generation comes into play. We probably identify more with Islam than we identify with the Indian subcontinent. I mean, India and Pakistan, in a sense, like spiritual homelands.
Right.
Where I've kind of differed on my journey is that I've looked into different spiritual approaches to self-realization, enlightenment. And I sat with Sufis, I sat with yogis, I sat with teachers of Advaita and non-duality, as a way to try and figure out what this reality is that everybody's looking for, whether we're looking through a religious angle, through accumulating wealth, relationships, or what have you. And there was then a series of events in which the idea of me looking for anything just died. And since then, I've literally been running around the world talking to people about this reality. Now, with my background being what it is, it's created a lot of it. My predominant demographic is white, middle class, has gone to India, has sat with the guru, but has now developed an interest in Sufism, because obviously the works of Rumi and the works of Ibn Arabi now are becoming very, very popular in the West. I feel that the works of Ibn Arabi are probably a lot purer in the West, whereas obviously you had a previous live stream where, you know, there is this new narrative coming out now that Rumi has technically been hijacked. There has been, like, the Orientalists have taken Rumi, people like Nicholson and Arbery have taken Rumi and literally translated in the way they wanted to. So I get a lot of people asking me about Sufism, because obviously my obviously Islamic heritage. So what I look to do is, there was a very famous Sufi in the Indian subcontinent called Ali Hajwari. People from Pakistan will know him as Data Sahib, and he once stated...
What's his name? It's Ali?
It was Ali Hajwari. There's a
Ali Hajwari, okay.
Yeah, there's a big shrine in Lahore called Data Sahib's, and everybody in Lahore will know it. And he once stated in one of his books that a reality with no name is now a name with no reality. So what I look to do through my work is constantly point to the reality of what we actually really are, which could be an entire live stream in itself. But it all kind of comes back to my heritage, because obviously I always say I'm a bit of a cliche. I'm a guy from the Indian subcontinent talking about spirituality, so I'm not doing anything original. But I think I'm now really, I mean, I'm very thankful for being on obviously this live stream, because recently what I found is I seem to be taking a trip back to the Islamic world and Sufism, and looking more into the classical side of it as well. I mean, I was in Bosnia last year, and you know, that's where you've got Sarajevo, which is known as the Jerusalem of Europe, and you've got all these great cultures came together in Bosnia, and
especially the Ottoman culture, and with the Turkic influence there in Sarajevo. It must be very interesting.
Oh, it's absolutely incredible. Myself, I ended up in Republika Srpska. I ended up in Banja Luka, which is more the Serbian end. So I still got to see the Ottoman influence on Serbians as well. And what was really interesting when I was there, I got to read a few of the Bosnian authors, so people like Ivo Andrić. And so I got to see the other side of the whole Ottoman Empire as well. And so it kind of gave me a bit more rounded perspective about it. So I'm re-entering the Islamic world, even though I'm a Muslim, but in a way whereby all this experience from traveling around. I mean, I sat with a Sufi when I was very, very young, and he said, he literally said to me, he goes, look at all these other different approaches, and then we'll show you where we go further. And that has naturally happened in my life, really. So, yeah.
You know, there's several points that I find interesting in what you said. This reconnecting, you know, with your heritage, with Islam. And the thing, you know, I mean, they say that if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going. And I find this to be very true, especially in today's globalized world. And I guess from, you know, your diaspora perspective. I mean, I used to live in the U.S. when I was younger. When I was a child. I did not grow up in the U.S. as an adult. But I still felt this sense of being a brown person in a Western culture. It has its perks, but on the other hand, there's a lot of soul searching that goes on. There's a lot of rehashing of the culture, because we cannot accept, you know, Eastern culture as it is in our home countries, because that would be an oxymoron. The fact that you are in a Western country, well, by necessity, change your perspective. And I just got a question here from one of our followers. He asks, how connected Asian Britons are to their South Asian culture? Is there a disconnect there, or do they still have this connection? Because you mentioned something very interesting about Islam being the new identity for a lot of folks of South Asian culture. So can you just give us your perspective on that?
I would say both. I'd say there's a disconnect going on now from obviously our culture of India or Pakistan. But what that's doing now is it's creating this connect with the Islamic world, but a purer version, devoid of culture. So, I mean, I can only speak for myself. What I found is that I left home at the age of 18, went away to university. Most of my friends were white and middle class. And although I wasn't westernized, there was still this appreciation because I came from a liberal but kind of traditional Pakistani family. What I found is I feel that we're in a unique position because we get to see the best of both. So we get to see the best of the Western culture and of the Eastern culture as well. And it creates this unique identity. Obviously, I'm going to mention this. I mean, there's that Turkish series Ertugrul, which is doing well. I've kind of watched, I think, 1 or 2 episodes. I mean, I traveled to those places, so I don't really feel the need to kind of see a second-hand version. But a lot of people are watching that at the moment. So, you know, the amount of times I get...
Why are Pakistanis so fascinated with that show?
Do you know what it is? There's a place, I mean, the way I would put it, there are 2 cities where obviously Sufism is kind of quite strong. One is Konya in Turkey, and the other place is Multan in Pakistan, which is known as Madinatul Awliya, which basically means the
Madinatul Awliya.
It is known as Madinatul Awliya.
Okay.
When you go, there's actually
City of Saints. Okay.
So I went there, a couple of years ago, and I think the Pakistani personality and the Turkish personality is kind of quite similar, and I think it's because of the fact that they're on the borders of the Islamic world, what traditionally is now the Islamic world, and there's parallels. They're both very martial cultures, I would feel, but at the same time, they kind of pay homage to a much more traditional classical version of Islam, I think, now than what we're seeing. I mean, I was in the Isle of Man last year, and I was at this mindfulness festival, and I was doing a talk on a Rumi quote. And what was really interesting was there was a professor of philosophy there, and we went to dinner afterwards, and the first thing he wanted to know about was the Islamic world and the rise of Wahhabism and what have you. So it's an interesting time to be a Muslim, because I think we need to kind of reconnect to what we actually are, but a purer version, but simultaneously, and also kind of honor the spirituality that I'm seeing is taking root in the West as well. Because when I first started talking like this, what I found was that my thought pattern was I'd go into a mosque, I'd start speaking, but my demographic seems like, as I said, it's white and middle class, and I find more people interested in the works of Ibn Arabi and Rumi and all the other, obviously, Sufis in the English community than I find in ours, because there seems to be this narrative, especially in the Pakistani community, of, oh, you can't read these things, they're very, very heavy philosophies. And I think what that does is it denies us the very heart and the very essence of Islam. And I think this is why Rumi has been culturally appropriated, I suppose, by the West, because... You know,
this raises a very important question. I mean, I looked at your website, and I, to be honest, I got the feeling that a lot of your, let's say, audience was in fact white and middle class.
Yes.
And I really admire your honesty for coming, for saying this. But why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's
I'm going to be
maybe?
I'll probably get like some comments about this. I feel that we have somehow lost the Rumi, and we have somehow lost the Sufis, because if you look at the Indian subcontinent, the typical Sufi sheikh is now a pir, and he's been reduced to handing out ta'weezes. Whereas if we look at Sufism, it comes from the word tasawwuf, which is a breakdown of 4 words: tawbah, safa, valaya, and fana. And it's an exact science for us to know ourselves. He who recognizes himself recognizes his Lord. And I believe within Islam there's a very deep spiritual tradition. But what's happened is, obviously since 1924, and obviously the breakup of the caliphate and all of that, I think we seem to have suffered from some sort of a memory loss. And we're now starting to rediscover that, which is why now the young man who was on your live stream a couple of weeks ago, are now kind of at the forefront.
Shargzadeh, yes.
Yeah.
Rumi was Muslim. The hashtag Rumi was Muslim.
Yeah, Rumi was a Muslim to kind of reclaim that. And I find that I'm doing something kind of similar in my work as well, because there is this huge interest in Sufism, and there's a huge interest in Islam in the West. But I think a lot of people don't want to walk into mosques because of the narrative that's going on. So they would rather speak to someone,
especially with the recent events, you know, and unfortunate events in Europe.
The Islamic world is so out of step with what's kind of going on, because if you, I mean, I'm from Pakistan, but if I trace my lineage back, it's through Persia. Like my name is Zahir Khan, and most people go, "Oh, you're a Pakhtun," and I'm like, "Well, no, I'm not a Pakhtun." Persian nobility took on the surname Khan.
So excuse me for asking this, but what are you? I mean, ethnically, are you Kashmiri, Koshur?
I'm Kashmiri. I hail, basically my father was from Kashmir. This is where it gets interesting, and I think this is why I'm doing the work I do. My mother's from Gujarat in Pakistan. So I'm technically half Punjabi and half Kashmiri. The language I speak at home is Patwari, which is the language that obviously that people in Kashmir speak. My mother speaks Punjabi.
Do you still speak it fluently? Do you still speak Patwari fluently?
Yes, I do. I wouldn't say I'm fluent. You know, I've kind of suffered from the other things as well, of like I'll put a bit of English. But what's interesting the way I speak Patwari is that my mother's Punjabi, and I've only recently realised that my mother speaks a different dialect to me. But I don't hear the second. I don't hear it as a separate dialect until somebody points out. So I speak Punjabi. I speak Meepri. Well, Patwari, but we call it like Mwari, Dwari, or Meepri. And I speak English, but originally we hail from, I mean, basically if we go into the caste system, we're Gakar Rajput. And if you look at history,
so what is that in caste terms?
In caste terms, we're Rajput. We're
Rajput. Okay.
But if you look at the history of that as well, because I looked into that as well, the Rajputs are meant to, sorry, the Gakar Rajput clan is meant to come from what would probably be modern day Iran now. However, there's even more further research now, which is saying that we could technically be Greek, because the first Gakars came with Alexander the Great into India. And then obviously, as people travel down the Silk Road, because there's an entire backstory here, which is looked into, which is why I am doing what I'm doing. The backstory is that, yes, we travel down the Silk Road, we travel from west to east. And obviously we came with, you know, the mystics or the Muslim traders, or however you want to put it. And then we settled in obviously Kashmir, on the border between Pakistan and Kashmir. So that region is populated by either Janjwar Rajputs or Gakar Rajputs. There's actually a fort to this day. And then the next journey was that my father, towards the end of his life, decided to come to the UK because he played polo, bred horses, and
he played polo. That's very aristocratic.
It was kind of really interesting. I didn't realize any of this until after he passed away, because when he got here, the language barrier was such that he was never able to have that dream, so ended up working in a factory. It was only when he passed away and wanted to be buried back home in Pakistan that I met several members of family I didn't know existed, and they were like, "Oh, this is, you know, did your father, you know, still play polo?" And I was like, "My father worked in a factory." So I think our stories define us, and our heritage is a massive part of that. And I think if we lose that heritage, I think we are poorer for it. We're so much more poorer for it.
So you know, this is all. I'm sorry to cut in there, Zahir. This is all very interesting, and I want to go back to a point that you mentioned about your audience. You said middle class white folk. Now, don't you find that when we try to, you know, engage with the West, you know, we have to water down our heritage a bit, you know, make it light, so to speak, you know. It's not going to be like, for example, if you look at some people who work, you know, with Sufism and who they talk to Western people, you know, concerning Sunnism, it seems that they sort of excise the Islamic part of it, you know, and they just deliver this sort of, you know, into the vein kind of, you know, cultural thing with just Sufism, no, you know, just Rumi, no Islam, no nothing. What do you think of that? I mean, isn't it kind of maybe, you know, misrepresenting the culture or the history there?
I think the thing is this: the Islamic world suffers from a lack of confidence in what it is. I think if we go back a couple of hundred years, you had Islamic thinkers, Greek thinkers, and thinkers from the Indian traditions actually sitting down and actually talking. So, for example, a really good example of that would be there was a prince known as Dara Shikoh who traveled from the west to the east, and when he came to India, he came across Advaita Vedanta, and he studied it, and he concluded that it was very similar to Sufism, just with different words. And what I do at my talks is I look to obviously highlight the parallels of what's going on. I think this watering down has been going on for a long time, and I think I've never hid the fact that I'm a Muslim. If anything, what I found is I tried at the beginning, I did do that. I was like, look, I really don't want to get involved in the Islamic world because I know what it's like. I mean, when I have Muslims come into talks, the first thing they want to do is they want to tell you about everything they know. And you're like, okay, then why are you here?
And they want to correct you probably because I think, you know,
of course.
Even on my Instagram, people are correcting me all the time.
it's part and parcel of it. But I think this is where what we really need is a much more elegant discussion then. Because I think in the Islamic world now, I think, you know, I find there's a much more openness and much more willingness to learn from a Western audience. And what I found is that, yes, I started off as a bit of a non-duality teacher, which is a kind of derivative of Advaita Vedanta. And it wasn't because that's who I was. It was easier to talk to people. Recently now, people want to talk about Sufism. So the group that I have, we're exploring it a lot more. You know, we are, and it is, I think it's a piecemeal approach. I don't think you kind of go straight into it and say, right, okay, we're going to take Ibn Arabi and we're going to break him down and discuss that. And I think you have to be aware of the person in front of you as well in order to have that conversation. But I mean, this, to me, this is so interesting, this conversation, because it's kind of saying, well, this is a, this is a different world now. This is a different place I'm going to. And I've always felt that my work is like, in a sense, a bit of a bridge. You know, I don't claim to be a scholar or an imam of any sort. And I always say to people, if you want to take this further, then that's great. We can go there. But what I've found is that because I concentrate on the actual experience, because I feel Sufism or Islam is an experience, it's a way of life. It's not a religion in the truest sense of, it's not a religion that something we do and it's dogmatic. I think it's a lot more open than that, which I know could open me up to criticism here as well. And I look to kind of point that out because I think the thing that got me was a couple of years ago, somebody asked me a question and said, does Islam have a spiritual tradition? And that really stayed with me because every religion in the world has a spiritual tradition. I mean, when I was in Bosnia, I went to a Russian Orthodox church for a service. And it was one of the most deeply spiritual things I'd ever seen. But I see the parallels between the Islamic world and the Christian world just by being in that place, by even seeing the architecture, even some of the ceremonies as well. So ultimately, it's like I look to try and point to the reality that we actually are. So yeah, that's what I try to do.
So going back to the linguistic issue, we have a question here from one of our followers. Zahir, have you read Pir Meher Ali Shah? Because he wrote in Patwari.
Yeah, I always say that his grandson Pir Nasiruddin Nasir Sahab was probably the only teacher I would have gone running to be his murid because he was incredible. I mean, Golra Sharif was responsible for obviously stopping the rise of the Ahmadis in Pakistan, and I think these are beautiful individuals, and there is only. I think what happens is when you hear these beautiful names, then you are brought into silence because what words could we use to describe these people? Golra Sharif is just this towering influence in the Islamic world, in the world of Sufis in Pakistan, and I think that's the best possible compliment I could possibly pay. And I know even then my words fall short really. So yeah, Golra Sharif is.
I'm sorry that I cut in with the question. So I want to go back to you're talking about your work. I'm going to be very frank with you, Zahir.
Yeah,
when I look at your Instagram, when I look at your, social media, I see a lot of stuff that I like. I see a lot of quotes. I
yeah.
see poetry. I see spiritual stuff. But
Mm.
if I wanted to describe you in one sentence, and that's why I called you a guru. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's accurate, and I'm
totally
sorry if
appropriate.
it's not accurate. But what are you exactly? I mean, what do? Are you interested in self help? Are you an
No, I'm not
Islamic
a self-help
Deepak
teacher because
Chopra?
I had
What
to
is it
back.
exactly?
Well, okay, I'm not a self-help teacher for a start because what I talk about is not going to improve your life at all. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, it's going to destroy your stories and your excuses and your ego and what have
Mm-hmm.
you. Guru's kind of, obviously I'm from the Muslim world, so the guru is an Indian term, but if you break down the word guru, it means one who takes from darkness into light. So
It just
that's
means
guru.
teacher, I think, right? That's what it means, teacher.
It means one who
Muallim.
takes from. It's a
Mm.
guide. It's like a guide. I mean, most teachers
Ah.
are guides. We take on a path. So I think a much more appropriate term would be I teach about self-realization, and
Mm-hmm.
predominantly what I use, the two methods that I use, Sufism and non-duality. But what I find is within the Sufi tradition, what I tend to use is poetry and storytelling.
So you're a life coach?
No,
Can I say that?
no,
Consultant?
no. Keep going. This could be good because
Not a psychologist. I don't think you're a
I
psychologist, are
talk
you?
about self-realization. I talk about enlightenment and help people to enlighten.
Ah.
Basically, because I know saying that could sound so arrogant and could really open you
Mm.
up to all sorts of accusations. I think if we were to look for a parallel in the Islamic world, and I could be technically seen as a sheikh of a certain tradition. I'm based in the Qadri school of Sufis,
Mm-hmm.
and
The
I
Qadri
don't,
school of Sufis. I know several Qadris among my friends and
yeah,
Gilanis. People who follow Gilani. Yeah.
yeah, basically my spiritual story is at the age of 23, I met a Sufi from the Qadri Sarwadi school,
Mm-hmm.
from a place in Pakistan. The Astana Alia of our school is in Kasur. And I stayed with him for 8 years. And then after that, I looked at teachers from other schools of self-realization, so Advaita, non-duality,
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism. And after several events, which could be termed popular as awakenings, the idea of looking for anything, seeking anything died. And since then, I've been speaking about this experience and I help others to realize their true self. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think, I'm not a self-help guy. What I'm looking to do is actually help you realize that the answers that you're seeking are within you. And for that,
Okay.
I have everybody come to me, from Muslims to non-Muslims to
So one of our followers has called you a seeker,
a
Archangel
speaker.
Healing. Yeah, he
What sort
says,
of thing?
Zahir, and then he says, is this true, Zahir, or have you found the treasure within yourself? Have you?
Would you like me to answer it simply? Yes.
However way you like.
Yeah,
Yes, you have.
I've
Okay.
stopped looking. I've stopped looking. I mean, basically,
Ah.
I've written a book about it called "Falling into the
Mm.
Mystery." If obviously the questioner would like to obviously read that, in which I detail my spiritual journey, and basically the conclusion of the journey. I believe the Prophet peace be upon him said, "Die before you die,"
Mm.
and it's something that's impersonal. It becomes very impersonal. Nobody can claim enlightenment, because that would basically mean that there is an individual, an ego, something that can claim it. The idea of a Zahir that's seeking is dead. And whatever now emanates is whatever now emanates, because
Mm.
I'm sure the asker of the question will also realize that there really are no words for this. So I just point. I mean, if we look at things like Sufism and Advaita, they're pointers, but what are they pointing to? Even the Quran in itself, talks, I believe in Surah Al-Fatiha, put us on the path of those you favored. And it's really about, when we take that journey, we will along the way meet guides. So I've met several guides who've helped me to get to the destination, whatever the destination would mean to people. But I think that's, again, another conversation. So
Right.
I'm more than happy for anybody to follow me after this and ask me some questions or anything. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, this is all. I mean, this is. I mean, in a
new.
sense, it is, and I like the fact that you, as a like fellow brown man, if I can put it that way. I mean, I've been to Britain several times, and I was in areas where there was a lot of a big Asian population.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, even though we come from different countries, you feel a sort of a certain
Yes.
shared background there,
Yeah,
and especially with the names and the food and all that. But my question to you is, how, I mean, while you are seeking, and I want to be very practical here.
Yeah.
How is it that you can, you know, make money and live and be economic within our culture? I mean, can you I mean, have you monetized what you're doing here, or is it completely different from your profession?
Right. Okay. This is what I've done, and I'm really glad you've asked that question, because that again now opens up another topic as well. I come from the obviously I come from England. I come from Britain, and as such I'm cross-cultural, so I'm a bit of both. And what happened was, literally, like I said, I was seeking, and now obviously I'm not, and I do meetings and I get invited to speak at places and all of this stuff. And a lot of my work is obviously for free, it's donation based, and a lot of my work I will also charge as well. So for example, if I'm doing meetings and I've got to hire venues and what have you, now the reason I'm able to charge and not have an issue of it is possibly because of more the Western culture that I've come from, and the fact that I realize that a lot of people in the West, if there isn't a charge with it, probably won't value it. But at the same time, if I'm meant to be standing on a street corner somewhere to meet someone to have a conversation, and there's absolutely no money behind it or anything like that, that's absolutely fine. I would answer that by saying Allah provides. And it's about trusting the fact that Allah provides. And I've noticed that since I started this journey, I mean, my story is that I got discovered in 2008. I was interviewed by two really big podcasts. One was called Never Not Here, and one was called Urban Guru Cafe. I was then interviewed by a big American site in 2011 called Butter at the Gas Pump, which was interviews with spiritually awakened ordinary people. I then disappeared. In about 2015, I came back, and in the last 5 years, I've written 2 books, traveled across Europe, done talks. I'm now obviously speaking to yourself, and it's all literally on the basis of trusting that Allah provides, but also living in a very practical, empowered way, because what Islam points to is a very practical way of living. And I feel because the Muslim world has now got caught up in arguments of he said and she said, we miss the fact we're very concentrated on the Zahir, but we've forgotten about the Batin. And a very famous Sufi Sheikh once stated, he goes, if we concentrate, if we know the Zahir, but we don't know the Batin, then we corrupt our faith. And I think this is why the Islamic world is in the state that it is. And I think this is why I literally end up in a different demographic altogether. But again, like I said, what's interesting for me is I'm now coming here and I'm getting these questions coming in thick and fast, which is quite nice as well, because it allows me as well to clarify my thinking. I would literally say to the audience that Islam has a deep spiritual tradition. And if we were to look at that, we would complete our faith. And then what would happen is we would realize that Islam as we understand it and Islam as is are 2 different games altogether. It's expansive in the truest sense of the word. But I think these are the conversations that we aren't having because of the fact that, like you just made a very important point, because we have to earn a living. We have to be doing all of this. And yet all of this is within the realms of the Islamic world, but we don't really trust it. So Islam is, I mean, I remember when I was young, you know, the accusation that would be leveled against Christians were, oh, you just go to church on a Sunday. And as Muslims now, we've become Friday Muslims. So, you know, there's a lot of Muslims now. And, you know, we can get all of these texts and we can read all of this and we can talk about the fact that Rumi, you know, has been stolen and this and this. But ultimately, Islam's something within us, and it's something that we have to journey inwards to discover that answer. And
I think we should, you know, appreciate the variation, you know, the diversity we have within the Islamic world. I mean, the amount of peoples, the amount of languages, the amount of points of view. I mean, this is the fascinating thing about our Islamic culture. I mean, in a sense, it's unified. We have an ummah, which is, you know, basically the same. I mean, you feel a certain, you know, connection, a certain fraternity, brotherhood with any Islamic person any Muslim person that you meet. I mean, whether it be in the West, in Africa, in the subcontinent, in the Arab world, in Persia. But on the other hand, we also have these diverse cultures locally. And I describe this as a metaculture. We have a metaculture that sort of covers, you know, huge swathes of the globe. But on the other hand, we have these distinct, you know, local or national cultures, I mean, what have you. And I think we as Muslims, we haven't really given enough attention, enough study to ourselves. I mean, we complain about Orientalists, you know, we complain about people with, what's that?
Massively, I agree with you.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, why don't we do something ourselves? And I think this is where people like you come in. I mean,
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that, and I'm sorry to interject.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
But this is what I agree with you, because what I found is the last 4 or 5 years, I found myself on a journey back into the Islamic world. But rather than read about it, I'm actually experiencing it by going to countries like Bosnia. I'm looking to go to Albania. I'm looking to go to Turkey, and actually firsthand see these. I'd love to explore the countries on the steppe. So your Chechnya, your Dagestan. I've got friends in Georgia.
By the way, that's a dream of mine, to visit the stands.
Well, you're coming with me then in that case. So you're coming with me, because I've actually got.
So hopefully Allah will provide, and we're gonna, go with together.
All I can say is, 5 years ago. My story is that 5 years ago, I was lying in bed on a Monday morning, and I'd been offered this really good job with this IT company, and I was going to make a fortune. I remember lying in bed, terrified, and I couldn't understand why I just couldn't go into work. And I then went to the Glasgow Theosophical Society to ask them if I could have a room so I could talk. And they just gave me a room, and that has literally been my life. And in that time, what I found is that if we trust, and I really love your point about why, what I found, and I agree with this point here, is we want to complain about what's going on, and we want to look for a solution outside ourselves. Well, why do we not look for the solution within the Ummah? And the solution is there, because like you said, we have diverse cultures, we have backgrounds. Sometimes I learn more about the Islamic world from non-Muslims than I learn from Muslims. And like I said, the reason I'm thankful for this conversation is because, to me, just by trusting and by observing and being aware of what's happening in this moment, what I'm finding is that this says to me that you're on this new journey, you're going into the Islamic world, and I'm really excited about what I'm going to learn. Like you said, I really want to go to the steppes. I've made contacts there as well, and I would love to travel down the Silk Road, because there are all these beautiful cultures. Like, I've recently got into Palmyri music, and I really like Georgian music as well. And
what kind of music is that?
Oh, Palmyri is there's a group of people called Palmiris who I believe.
Oh, the Palmiris, you mean in Tajikistan?
Yeah, in Tajikistan. So looking at this, and what I listen to Uyghur music as well.
Uyghurs, yeah.
And what I find is there is a thread that goes through all of this. So I think this is why there is that connectivity in the Ummah, that there is a thread. And there's this beautiful book I once read. It's called Memoirs of a Dervish, and I'd really recommend everybody read it. And I believe it's written by a man called Robert Irwin. And he talks about the obsession with Sufism that Oxford and Cambridge University had in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of these graduates traveled and did the North African Sufi trail all the way to Algeria, which I believe, and please, anybody correct me if there's anybody from Africa. I think there's the Alawiya school, and the Tijaniya and the Samaniya are in Africa. These are 3 schools of Sufism. And I think the thing is, sometimes if we go into our culture, we look at it, and we actually get on the ground and actually see these things. I learned so much about Islam in Bosnia. Even the architectural construct of the masjids is absolutely crazy. And I got to, there was this one masjid that had been completely destroyed during the Serb Muslim, conflict, and the UN had rebuilt it, and inside it looked exactly like the Hagia Sophia, and I was like, wow. And I think this is where I think we need to start kind of replaying.
And the Hagia Sophia was Greek, so
sorry?
The Hagia Sophia itself was Greek. It was a Greek
it was a church. It was an Orthodox church that was.
The Ottomans were not averse to to co-opting other elements into Islamic culture. It was fine for them to build. They didn't destroy the cathedral. They just turned it into a mosque, and I think that's to their credit.
But this is where I think that spirit has to come back again, because if we look at the Islamic world as was to us as it is now, we are now kind of becoming much more separate from the rest of the world, and I think that's not going to benefit us. Whereas if you look at the older Islamic world, there was this free flow of information, between the Greeks, between the Muslims, and I think in the spirit of learning, I think the Islamic world is then richer for it. And I think this is why I really enjoy what you're doing, because going to Bosnia, I didn't think I'd hear the word mashallah in Republika Srpska, especially in Serbia. And yet it's an intrinsic part of them. And then there was this whole joke about Turkish coffee was actually Bosnian coffee, was actually Turkish coffee. And
okay.
so I first had Turkish coffee from a Bosnian woman, a Bosnian Serbian woman. And I think if we have that spirit of openness, we'll see that really it is about sharing these different cultures, but also having our identity as well. Because sometimes what can happen is something that you said at the beginning, is we can lose our identity. And I'm seeing that in the Muslim community, in the younger Muslim community now, because everything's everything's okay. And yet what I find is there is probably a better appreciation, and this is my experience, and I could completely be wrong, and it's just, what I found on my travels, that there seems to be a much more appreciation for your Ibn Arabis and for your Rumis in the West. But again, I think this is where, going back to the earlier live stream that we did, it's about presenting the real Rumi. It's about presenting the real Ibn Arabis and what they actually
And
meant.
interestingly, somebody described you as a new Rumi on Amazon, in an Amazon review. A person called Stephen.
Yeah, Stephen Craig Brown is he's someone who's been following my work since about 2008. It took him 10 years to get to a meeting, and Reflections is actually dedicated to him, because what happened was he came into the meeting and he said, "Look, I would really love for you to put your poetry down in a book." And like I said, I'm a firm believer in trusting, and over a 2-week period, that book wrote itself. I've never written a book, as I say, the same way Rumi never wrote the Mustafi. The comparison with Rumi, I'm humbled. I'm absolutely humbled, but even I would be the first to admit that I wouldn't be able to throw left shoes. But I think that's more the love of when people appreciate what you do, because it's literally all I've done for these last couple of years is just point to people. I don't have any answers for you. I work from the premise that the answers are within you, and when we discover those within us, then we're empowered. And I think that's an attitude that the Islamic world used to have. They would look inwards. We were deeply spiritual people, and then when we started looking for answers outside ourselves, we lost our heritage, our culture. But that's not just within the Islamic world. I see that in the Christian world. I see that in the Judaic world as well. I think when we lose what's intrinsically us, I have Muslims, non-Muslims all coming to me, and if somebody needs to hear something from the Bible, which is for them, then that's absolutely fine by me. But at the same time, I think, we are Elidimi, we are people of the book. And I think that's
there's a hadith by the Prophet, peace be upon him, al-hikmah dallatul mu'min, which is, wisdom is to be sought, anywhere, by the mu'mins, by the faithful.
We can find Islam everywhere. There was a very famous Imam, and I can't remember his name, who once stated that he came to Europe and he found Islam, but he found no Muslims. And
I think that's I know what you're talking about. It's Hussein, I think. Yeah, he's an Egyptian writer. Is a very is a pioneer, in intellectual circles in the Arab world. So, Zahir, this I'm sorry to cut in. This has been very interesting, and I just want to say one last thing, because we don't want to go on for too long. Otherwise we might risk tasking the attention of our followers who kindly have tuned in. I just want to end this first of all saying it's been very nice to talk to you. Very great.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. When I looked at your social media, I liked what I saw. I was looking for certain content. I found that you concentrated on nothingness and on falling into the experience. I mean, I was looking for like maybe a doctrine or something. I couldn't find that. Now I understand a doctrine, a certain doctrine, or maybe certain steps or something. Maybe I was looking for the wrong thing.
Of course,
But now that I have talked to you, I can understand more where you're coming from, and thank you for clearing that up. I find that you are you have a certain charisma about you. And I'm not known for humoring people. I say what I think. I'm not going to compliment you if I don't actually think it. And also there's the power of suggestion, I think, which also plays a role. I mean, when you present something in a sort of palatable way to people, and maybe they're down on their luck, maybe they're not feeling too good, maybe they have issues, and then a person like you speaks to them in the correct way. I think that's very helpful, and I'm truly I enjoyed your knowledge. I mean, obviously, you are a well-read man. You know a lot about Sufism. You know a lot about spirituality. That's very interesting. And I hope we can, repeat this at some time in the future if you're open for it.
The suggestion did come into my head because I think what we've done is we've opened up obviously a lot of doors here, and it would be good to obviously do some more. I mean, on my part, I'm really thankful to you as well. Going back
it's my
to
pleasure.
Your obviously, I'm not offering anything. I'm at an interesting part in my journey, and that is that I've done absolutely everything in the last 4 or 5 years to self-sabotage this journey and not accept what I have to do. So I feel that in the future, obviously, the way I communicate will obviously change as well. And I really am so grateful to you for obviously, giving me this platform to speak, because to me now, I think it's very interesting that, obviously I'm talking to more Muslims, and there has been a trend as well in my talks, and it's something I've tried really hard to resist, where people want to know about Sufism and want to know about Rumi and why he did what he did. And I think if I can offer a few broken words or what have you, to kind of satiate someone's, thirst, then all good. But yeah, let's definitely do this again. I think
sure.
we could go into different viewpoints. I'm going to call out a certain young man who's translating the works of Rumi, Mountain Time, and I think it would be lovely to have that young man there as well, because I believe there's a lot we can learn as well. And
you mean he's my friend, Muhammad Ali Mujarradi, Sharq Zadeh.
Because I really love what he's doing. And
is he the guy with the turban? You mean the guy with the turban,
the
right?
Guy with the turban. I'm not even
he's quite a character. So we can have them. Yeah, we can have them. That would be very interesting.
The thing I found is that the end of seeking wasn't the end of life. It was actually the beginning. And I think I'm probably more of a student now than when I was before, because before there was this idea I'm going to get somewhere else on that. So I'm enjoying this kind of coming back home, so to speak. So, I like the fact that there are, like example, the Imam. I mean, I've always read that the Imam was from Pakistan, and now, you've told me that no, it was actually from Egypt. So I like that I'm learning stuff, because for so long I read it somewhere and thought, right, okay, this guy was from Pakistan. I think this is where we can really, in a sense, help each other really. Ultimately, I think the thing I found is if we could get to that point one day where there was just silence between us, then I feel that's where the truest of conversations happen. And inshallah, it is my my prayer.
Maybe you can help me with that. Maybe you can help me, because my life is very noisy.
Well, look, we've agreed a couple of things here. One is that you're definitely visiting the steps with me. So next time, I'm going to be swinging by Bahrain to see you. And secondly, yes, definitely.
You're welcome anytime. So
brother, with this lockdown that's happening here in the UK, I was thinking about getting.
Well, and hopefully it's going to clear up, by next year. I hope.
I really do. I really do. So
I really need to travel, and I'm coming to the UK hopefully. So probably I can see you there.
I've got a bit of a love affair going on with the Balkans at the moment. I was meant to be there this month. As a matter of fact, I was meant to be there this weekend doing a weekend retreat. And it's like I'm fascinated by those countries, and we've now agreed we're going to travel, and it's now on Instagram as well, all for all and sundry to look at. And and we'll have the other conversation as well. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Zahir. Very interesting to have you on, and good night. Talk to you again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye. Thank you. Bye.